This is M. LaVora Perry with Jarod Perry Richardson and on July 20th, 2012, and we're interviewing Michael Smedley, the Executive Assistant to East Cleveland Mayor Gary Norton. Michael, please tell us about yourself and the history of your family.
The history of my family. The history of my family. Can you be a bit more specific? The history of my family. What does that mean?
Well, first of all, about yourself. What is it that we should know about you?
What is it that you should know about me? I am 43. I was born in Cleveland. I am one of 5 children.
Boys or girls?
3 boys, 2 girls. I have an older brother and a sister and a younger brother and sister.
So you're right in the middle.
I'm right in the middle. So you know all the emotional problems I got.
When were you born?
I was born October 1st, 1968 at University Hospitals. My mother was divorced. She raised 5 kids on her own. She was in the medical field. She was an LPN. That's the job that I remember her having when I could recognize what jobs were.
And where were you all living at the time?
We were living in Cleveland on a street called Keymar Court.
Where's that?
That is where, it's off 101st and Chester. The neighborhood is gone due to Cleveland Clinic and its expansion and redevelopment of the area. So most of that neighborhood is gone. There's a historic street that can't be torn down, but other than that, it's gone. So I grew up there for the first 13, 14 years of my life. We moved to Cleveland Heights. I went to High Top.
When did you graduate from Heights?
In 1988. So my mother raised 5 kids. She was an LPN. During that time, in the 80s, early 80s, there was a change in healthcare where hospitals believed that they didn't need LPNs anymore. So LPNs all over the nation got laid off, starting in California, and it made its way west.
The LPN being
Licensed practical nurse, right. So my mother had to go back to school to get her degree, and she became an RN.
A registered nurse.
Registered nurse. So she had 5 kids to take care of. She gets laid off. She goes to work in a nursing home, which is considered, at that time, a considerably less amount of money. So I'm like any other son of a single parent whose income had been reduced, and a family of 6. So, you know, we struggled. She struggled. I didn't really know that we were struggling, you know.
Why didn't you know?
I knew that I lived around a bunch of poor folks. There were 1 or 2 families who had the finances to get their kids what they wanted, but most of us couldn't get what we wanted.
You mean even after you lived in Cleveland Heights? That was
No. And during that time.
While you still lived off
In Cleveland, right. When my mother lost her job. So, I mean, I knew we didn't have a lot. It's not like we had a lot and then lost a lot. We had a little and lost a lot, but the lifestyle didn't necessarily change because, you know, she had 5 kids and she was a single mom. So.
Wait, I'm not sure I understand. You're saying the lifestyle didn't change because it was already, or because you already didn't have a lot, or was your mom resourceful and it just, you know, it didn't seem like?
I mean, I grew up in a poor neighborhood in the Huff area. Nobody really had money. My mother had 5 kids. She had a decent job, and then when she lost her job, I mean, she was resourceful at that point. You know, it's not quantifiable like, you know, you get 5 Christmas gifts, and when she lost her job, you get 2 Christmas gifts. You know what I mean? She made do. And
You're saying that's what happened? Christmas gifts, right?
no, I was being facetious. I have a crazy sense of humor, so. You know, she lost her job. She went to work in a nursing home. She had to work more. So, I mean, she was resourceful. That means she spent more and more time away from home. And being a single parent, you know, the more time you're away, you know, the less involvement you have in your kid's life. And it was just an unfortunate situation. I mean, we didn't turn out to be drug addicts or criminals or felons or anything like that. But living in a neighborhood that was full of them, I mean, I think she did a pretty good job.
So what do you attribute that to? Since you were home alone a lot, what did you do with that time?
I mean, we went to school, we played, we did everything that any other kid would do. But if we didn't do what she said, she'd whoop us. You know?
That was effective.
Extremely. Something that should be, I mean, we need to go back to those times if you ask me. My mother would work 3 to 11, don't get home till midnight, and on a summer day, you had to be in by 11 o'clock. And 11 o'clock came, everybody scrambled to get home.
She whooped you with a belt?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, scrambled to get home. You know, my older sister called my mother while she at work. And, you know, you want to be next to the phone so you can tell your side of the story. So, yeah, whoopings were extremely effective. It wasn't beatings or anything like that. You know, we didn't bleed afterwards, you know, but it was extremely effective. Living in a neighborhood, and in my neighborhood in Cleveland, when crack hit, it was an epidemic, you know, of biblical proportions. It, in a summer, transformed the entire community.
You remember that summer?
I remember that summer, yes, vividly.
What year was that?
It was like 1983.
So you were, what, 15?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
What happened? What do you think happened to have that, like, burst of crack in the neighborhood all of a sudden?
You know, I mean, in poorer neighborhoods, people struggle to make ends meet. And drugs is always part of the economics. You know, people sold, when I grew up, it was marijuana. I mean, we didn't know anything about heroin or cocaine or any of those crazy, you know, extremely dangerous drugs. Acid, that was not part of our drug culture. So people smoked marijuana. And people sold marijuana, and it was a communal drug. You know, people would get together and do that. And then, I mean, I can't remember the first day that I heard about crack, but I seen a different type of people who sold drugs, people who were foreign to our neighborhood.
Foreign? How did you know they were foreign?
Because I never seen them before. I grew up in the neighborhood, you know everybody. Don't know where they were from or anything like that, and I guess they were introducing it to the neighborhood, and people began to smoke it like in that spring, like in March, February, March. And by the summertime, you would see, I mean, you could see, because it's not a communal drug. I mean, people were scrounging around, and we were wondering, well, what the heck is wrong with people? You know what I mean? And we found out what they were doing. It was crack. And
scrounging around to do what?
To find drugs, to to when they had their drugs, they would run off and be by themselves. And by the time summer hit, people in the neighborhood who used to sell marijuana started selling crack. So people that we knew were doing it, were selling the drug that was brought in by people we didn't know. And they had started giving it away. You know, people bought marijuana, but they were giving away crack. And when people who live on my street, people who I grew up with, mothers and fathers who I've known and slept at their houses and during sleepovers, I don't know if they were smoking marijuana, but they ended up smoking crack. And the entire household changed. I mean, mothers and fathers would fight and be out on the street fighting. Possessions would disappear. Kids wouldn't have shoes.
So because the money was going to...
Money was going to crack. People were selling their kids shoes, you know. And people who lived on my street, at least one person on my street sold drugs, ended up selling crack. He didn't start off as a marijuana seller. For some reason, I don't know how they got to him, and he started selling crack. And he destroyed probably 10 families on my street himself.
So do you think this was an individual thing, like these people who started selling crack just were individually doing something, or do you think it was, and they just happened to be doing it along with other people? Or do you think there was a bigger cause?
I don't think it was a conspiracy, if that's what you mean. I think it was wherever people began to smoke crack, and I remember watching Richard Pryor talk about it, and they called it freebase, and he did a whole comedy stand-up thing on it. When they had taken freebase and added so many different ingredients, which reduced the amount of actual cocaine that's in it, and they made it affordable, they made it cheap for people, and because they knew what type of high folks were getting, because they were freebasing, you know, from what I know, since the 60s and the 70s. I mean, Richard Pryor, you know, everybody watched Richard Pryor at the time. And when they made it cheap and affordable, they knew that they could make money from it because they knew the type of experience a person would have. And they just introduced it to poor people. I mean, giving poor people the experience that rich people had with drugs. And when they figured out how to cheaply manufacture it, that's when they began to distribute it widely. And when it hit my neighborhood, people could afford it. $5, $10. You wasn't getting a lot. You weren't, you know, but that was the point. It was so addictive. Exactly, it was so addictive, right. But the point of all of that is my mother, I didn't really see my mother until the weekend during school years. I would go to school, leave the house at 6:30, get home at 3:30. By that time, my mother had to be at work at 3 o'clock. She didn't get off until 11:30, didn't get home till midnight. So during the week, I didn't see her. I would see her on the weekends. During the summertime, she would work from 3 to 11, and we would get up about 7, 8 o'clock during the summertime, eat our breakfast, do whatever we had to do in terms of chores, and rush to get outside. My mother would probably still be asleep, you know, by the time I left the house.
So how, do you remember having any thoughts or feelings about that, about that you didn't see your mother alive?
I mean, I was a kid. I had no understanding. I didn't realize the impact of that until I became an adult.
And what do you think the impact was?
I think it had a negative impact. I mean, it affects how you would raise your own kids. It would affect what your relationship with your kids would be. it affects almost every aspect of your life, because most of your life, life lessons you learned not in the house, you learned on the street, basically. You know, drug use, sex, responsibility, discipline, work ethic, all of that stuff you don't learn in the home, where you would imagine that's where you would learn about it or hear about it, you know. But hearing about it and having some type of organized structure so that you can actually live it, you know, my mother had to work.
And when you went out, you said you all rushed outside during the summertime to do what? What'd you do outside?
Ride bikes, go to the park, go to the museums, play basketball, football, things that you don't generally see kids do today, you know. One kid had an Atari, you know, the first video game. Now Xbox is just everywhere. But one kid had an Atari. You had to actually, if you wanted to have a good time, you had to do something physical. You know what I mean? Now you don't necessarily get that stimulation, you don't. So, you know, I did what every kid did at that time. We rode bikes, swimming, football, basketball, all that stuff, baseball.
Where'd you do these things, and what museum did you go to?
We used to love the art museum. We used to love the duck pond that they had up there. So, and we loved the Auto Museum, the Natural History Museum. We stayed up there.
And those were all free?
All free, yeah. And we would walk from where I live. It wasn't that far. I mean, we were a kid. You would walk 5 miles and not really know. So yeah, we would do that. We would do everything in the neighborhood, you know. So my only point of telling you about the darkness of that is that none of my brothers and sisters were on drugs, nor myself. None of us went to jail, not even misdemeanors. I had one misdemeanor, but I didn't get it until I was an adult. My license I used to be in organized labor, and I was living in D.C. I was living in New Jersey, drove here to Cleveland on vacation, got a ticket on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, ended up moving to D.C. and getting pulled over by the police. They said, hey, your license expired. Yeah, you know what they said? And a woman got pulled over right in front of me. You know, they said, you know what? Now you're gonna have to tell people if the police ask you if you've ever been arrested for something, now you gotta tell them yes. You know what they did with the white woman? They let that woman go. Right in front of me. And this is in the 2000s. This wasn't back in '65. But anyway. So yeah, I've been arrested before. I got street cred now. But anyway, my point of telling you all of that, it was that it's amazing that my mother, whatever, in my younger years, like up to about 7, my grandmother lived with us and she passed away. But between my grandmother and my mother and the closeness of her siblings, my aunts and uncles and cousins, we did everything. Every holiday, we did everything together. Because of that, and the fact that they whipped the mess out of us, we didn't get involved in any of that. And I was right smack dab in the middle of it.
So was your mother's family living near you, or did they just?
No, they just lived all over, you know, not too far.
What year did your parents divorce, and where was your dad? Did you see
My
him?
father divorced when I was a baby. My mother and father divorced when I was a baby. No, my father, we never really had any interaction.
When you say baby, so then your other 3 siblings,
From a different father.
Oh, okay,
Right.
okay.
All right. So my mother was married twice, divorced twice.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it is amazing. I was right smack dab in the middle of it. You know what I mean? I used to watch transactions all the time. You know, gang fights I used to see all the time. You know, I was pretty good with these, Jarod. You know what I mean? but I never was really into to all that stuff. For me, everything was intellectual, you know.
How so? How did you mean you read a lot? Is that what you're saying?
I did. I didn't really discover the enjoyment of reading until I was like 18. You know, I read because it was a requirement. I was an extremely good reader. I used to read to the class from elementary school to high school, you know. But I didn't really learn the enjoyment, discover the enjoyment of reading until I was like 18, 19 years old.
So I just want to get things straight in my head.
Okay.
Your father left when you were a baby.
Uh-huh.
Then your mom remarried.
Right.
And your stepfather lived with you all?
Yes.
And then when he left?
Right.
How old were you when he left?
I was probably around 10.
So did he have any interaction with the family after that?
No.
Okay. And what year did you all move to Cleveland Heights?
86 or something like that.
So you were
16, 15, 16.
Okay. And then what year? You said you graduated in '88.
Uh-huh.
Did you go to college right after graduation?
I went to a technical school first,
Which one?
ETI, because I was really interested in engineering.
Is it still open?
Probably not.
Okay. What does the ETI stand for?
Electronic Technical Institute.
Okay. And what did you study?
Engineering. Then I went to the University of Cincinnati.
Okay. So you stayed there for how
A
long?
year. Figured that the only reason I went, I was exceptionally good in math. I mean, I can get an A in math and not even really study, because it's not like it's something that you have to think about. I mean, the formula is the formula. You just apply the formula. I never understood why people could not get math, because it was so simple. Did I strike a nerve over this? Okay. So I never understood why. I mean, the only courses that I thought were challenging were classes that were theoretical. Theory, philosophy, courses like that. But courses like English, math, social studies, government. Math is about just remembering the formulas, knowing the formulas, and the other courses are about how good your memory is. I mean, if you say in 1776, blah, 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 and you see it on the test, it's the same thing. You don't have to really think about it. You just got to remember it.
So with math, do you know math concepts, or you just memorize the formulas?
Memorize the formulas, but in a practical way, not simply, the Pythagorean theorem is what it is. But just being able to apply it in a practical way, it's like, it's almost like tying your shoe. There's a formula to that. But when you learn it, when you know it, you can experiment with tying your shoe. So you don't have to do it the most basic formula to it, where you have to take this over this, and you can double bow it, you can one bow it, you can bow it and then bow it again. You know what I mean? And I hate to be that elementary, but I'm just trying to make a point. So yeah, I was pretty good at math. That's why I went into engineering. But I never really liked it.
So then you
never really liked engineering.
Okay. So then you said you went to what school in Cincinnati?
University of Cincinnati.
What did you study there?
Labor relations.
For your undergrad, to get your undergrad in labor relations. Did you go on, or did you get your?
No, I got recruited straight from college to go into organized labor.
And so what did you do with that? What is that, like union?
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm. Because I was black from the inner city, I started on the ground floor. I was an organizer, a union organizer.
Where?
Here in Cleveland. I work for SCIU Local 47 and HERE Local 10.
Okay, what are those?
Service Employees International Union, which is the healthcare union. As a matter of fact, it's the most progressive union in the nation today. HERE is the Hotel and Restaurant Employees International Union, which represents hotels and restaurants. Started out as an organizer. As a matter of fact, I organized the first home health care agency, excuse me, in Ohio, which is the Visiting Nurses Association.
You created a union for them? Is that
Yes, I organized them into the union, the first home health agency. I organized Jacobs Field into the union. I organized various nursing homes in Cuyahoga County and on the west side.
So when you do that, you just go from person to person telling them the benefits of being in a union?
Basically. So I started at the ground floor. I left SEIU and then I started doing it for HERE. I went to the International Union of HERE, the headquarters of HERE, because you have the headquarters and you have local offices. I went there and I organized around the country. I organized Gate Gourmet, which is the second largest food servicer for airlines. And we did a 32 city campaign and I coordinated that. I organized hotels across the country. I organized airports, the San Francisco airport, the airport in Austin, Texas. Ran campaigns all over the place. As a matter of fact, I was working on the San Francisco airport organizing campaign when 9/11 happened. That's how I remember it.
So you were in San Francisco at the time?
Yeah. Then I continued to move up in the organization, so I used to go and take over local unions that were in bad shape. I ran Local 69 in New Jersey, which was, the leadership was part of the Genovese crime family. I had to have a bodyguard, the whole nine. Ran the local union in Louisiana. Ran a local union in Texas. Then I went to DC and for a local there, and I ran the hotel division. We represented like 32% of the hotel industry, and I managed the contract and the staff and business agents and all that other stuff. I left there and came, as a matter of fact, I vowed never to come back to Ohio. I didn't even like coming to visit anymore.
But why?
Because I just didn't like Ohio. I didn't like, I mean, I just didn't like it. What?
So what was it that you didn't like?
Having an opportunity to live all across the country and meet different cultures and meet different people from different countries, you get an understanding of where you really come from. In some cases, it makes you appreciate it, and in some cases, it makes you you don't appreciate it that much. And the closed-mindedness that became obvious to me after being where I've been. Cleveland, Ohio was just a place, just the interaction between males and females. It just was not, it was like a place I didn't want to be. And then I was poor here too, so.
So what do you mean by the interaction? What interactions between male and female seem?
The interactions between males and females in terms of trying to develop a relationship. I mean, and what generally how people base the foundation, what the foundation of that relationship is, and the things that I've experienced and witnessed,
For example?
For example, men thought it was a good thing to take from a woman, to take her money, to take her possessions, and that was applauded and promoted, you know, and accepted by the women that they took it from. So that was, you know, that, and being in other places, it was much more, in some cases, mutual respect, you know. And in some cases, women wanted men who didn't have anything so that they can control them and dominate them. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist all over the country, but I just didn't, I mean, that interaction, and then it metamorphosed, the metamorphosis of that is the unreasonable expectation that women had of men when you leave a certain social economic level. You know, it had unreasonable expectations. In other places, it was like, okay, it's a mutual respect. If I like you and you like me, that's the basis of our relationship. Let's figure out, do we really like each other? In Cleveland, it's a little bit different. It's all based on economics. You know, some people don't want you to have anything so that they can control you for whatever reason. I mean, I see it all the time. And then other people, they want to know what you got so they can try to take it from you. You know.
Oh, union organizing. This is kind of changing. Let's say I'm a hotel worker,
Mm-hmm.
not in a union.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say? What are some of the things you say to me to persuade me that I should join a union?
It's not necessarily what I would say to you. It's what you would say to me. I would ask you questions about your job, about how you feel about your job. How do you feel about you know, your wages, your health insurance? Ask you all the questions about that. And it would ultimately boil down to you telling me how much you don't really like your job. It's just the fact that you never had anyone ask you questions in that way to make you realize that, okay, maybe this is not the best place to work.
So would you target employers that you felt were not being fair to their employees?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way that you can do it. I mean, you can do it the other way. You can, but normally you want to go somewhere where there are issues.
And how do you find out? Is it because people have been? How do you find out there's issues at a workplace?
I mean, the industries that you organize in, you know the good bosses from the bad bosses, the good companies from the bad companies. You know what I mean? And that's really how you do it.
Okay.
Like if I did a lot of nursing home organizing. I'm trying to think of a good name to use. I think it was, I can't remember the name. I wouldn't want to say it anyway. But they nationally treated their employees like crap. So we would target that operator.
Walmart isn't unionized, right?
Right.
What's preventing that?
Money. It costs 10 times as much to try to organize a union. Okay, it's like this. It's, say for example, the state of Georgia wanted to go to war with the United States. The federal government will outspend you. The other 49 states will outspend you, outman you, outgun you. And that's the dynamic. These corporations are worth billions, you know, and some local union office probably got $3 million in the bank to operate its entire operation, you know. They can outspend you, you know. And then, you know, labor laws have been weakened over the decades. So, you know, it's Walmart will outspend you. You know, it's illegal to fire an employee if they try to organize a union, and it takes 6 or 7 months or even longer to get before the National Labor Relations Board and get an outcome. Sometimes it takes years. So, and then, you know, the employer may end up paying back wages. They can pay somebody $50,000 in back wages. They can pay $200,000-300,000 in back wages. They can pay $1 million in back wages. A union contract for Walmart will cost them somewhere between $50 to $60 million a year. So would you rather pay the $3 million or the $50 million every single year? So they'll do everything that they can. They will fire everybody. They will do all that. So, you know, they got more money.
They would fire everybody, and then it would be easy to rehire people who need jobs.
Right.
Because a lot of people need jobs.
Right. And then they'll pay the back wages if they're found to have done something illegal, but they would have stopped the organizing campaign. Yeah. So.
So how did you end up in Ohio, back in Ohio?
I was in D.C.
Still union organizing?
Yeah, I was working with a local, running the hotel division. Doing that type of work is extremely taxing, extremely taxing. And some disagreements that I had with some folks, I just decided to leave. And I was going to go to New Orleans. I love New Orleans. You talking about Southern hospitality, you talking about friendly people. One of the most dangerous places in the country, but Southern hospitality there is amazing.
Dangerous because of the landscape?
No, dangerous because people will kill you for no reason. You know, dangerous, that type of dangerous. In certain parts, not all over. But Southern hospitality, I mean, it's amazing how friendly people are, especially, well, before the hurricane had hit. You know, to me that was a true definition of a black town, because
before Hurricane Katrina.
right, because blacks would start businesses and get patronized by blacks. That's not Cleveland, you know. Young folks as young as 22 and 23 are homeowners already. You know, 23 and 24-year-olds are business owners already. I mean, the culture there was just, it was excellent. It was excellent. I mean, you would, you know.
Why do you think that blacks don't patronize black businesses here?
Well, because it's conditioning. Conditioning of the mind, really. You would think, people think, because of the racism that exists in the South, people were forced to deal with their own community if they wanted to spend their money, if they wanted to do something where they would not be discriminated against. The only way that you could do that is to spend it with your own kind. You know, when people came north, most folks who came north, I won't say most, because there were like two tides that came. A lot of people had something or came here and built something, and I don't even really want to go into all of that, my theories on that. All right.
Well then, how did you end up in East Cleveland?
A friend of mine called me. He said, "Hey man, you should come to East Cleveland. You should meet this mayor. I mean, wow. I mean, what you do and this guy, you know, you'll make a great team."
So you were still in Washington at the time?
Still in Washington.
Okay.
He said, "You should come. You should come. You should come." And I did. I came.
And what year was that?
2006.
Do you mind telling me who was that, who invited you, who suggested that?
A guy named Ernest Shaver, who lived on Speedway.
Okay. Is he still here?
No, he doesn't live in East Cleveland anymore. So I didn't have. I would say I'm leaving my work. I'm gonna leave. My intentions was to start my own business because everybody said, "Hey man, you're giving too much to others. You need to put into yourself." I was gonna start a private business. So I came back with just came back and I didn't have anything. Shit, basically homeless because I left D.C. Came, I stayed with him for a while, and I got involved in East Cleveland politics with the former mayor, Eric Brewer.
Oh, that's the mayor.
That's the mayor he was talking about, right? You know, and you know, the first few months, I mean, I thought I didn't know him, never even heard of him. I just knew based on what a friend of mine told me. So I came, got involved. Turned out that we were just completely opposite in terms of what's right and what's wrong, and I just stopped.
You quit.
I never worked for him directly. I volunteered for him, and I just stopped volunteering for him.
What were you? Did you get a job when you got here?
I did. I was managing a child care center,
Okay.
running the after-school program.
So, can you remember your earliest memories of East Cleveland? Not just when you came back, but did you have any memories of it from when you were?
I lived in Cleveland. My aunt lived in East Cleveland, and I remember sometimes in the summer coming up here to spend weeks
This
with
is your
them.
mother's sister?
My mother's sister,
What was her first name?
Shirley.
Okay.
She had two daughters, and we used to love coming up here because of the park. You know.
Where did she live?
She lived in the Hayden area. I couldn't tell you the name of the street.
How'd you get to the park? Did you walk or take a bus, or did she?
She drove. Yeah. I mean, I just knew we were going to East Cleveland and get in the car. We ended up at my aunt's house. I didn't know the name. Can't even remember the name of the street.
So how old were you around that time?
I was like 5, 6 years old.
And so what are your memories of that time in East Cleveland?
I mean, it was just fun. I was a kid. It was just fun.
What did you do in the park?
Hiked, played, picnics, barbecues, those types of things. Yeah.
So what was that like?
What do you mean? What was it like?
You said it was fun, you know.
That's what it was like. It was like fun. I mean, I had a good time. I mean, 5, 6 years old. What else? You know, I don't know. I can't. You know, it was fun. I wasn't thinking about things. I was just thinking about ants and worms and grasshoppers and trying to catch rabbits and things that you saw in the park and eating and running and playing and laying in the grass and the sun shining.
So what are your favorite memories of East Cleveland?
Those are it.
In what ways, well, do you think the city has changed over time? And if so, how?
I mean, the obvious. You have, my analysis is like everyone else's. At one point, you had people who had money, and then there was a change, and more people with less money began to move in the city, and people who had money versus the people who had some money, that began to shift, where it went from more people who had money than there were people who had some money. That began to tilt. So people who had money and people who had some money, the balance, the population, the number of people began to change. And as that began to change, the dominant socioeconomic group was different. And the people who had money began to leave, which opened up space. And the people who had some money was the dominant. And people who had no money began to fill the space that people who had money had left. And East Cleveland was still a decent place in terms of the amount of tax dollars available to operate a city. It was relatively still there. And then that began to shift. People who had no money began to catch up with the people who had some money, and then it began to overtake the people who had some money. And because that shift in demographic, and cities operate on finances, the amount of finances had changed because of that shift. People had no money. So we're in a situation today where there are more people who have no money than there are people who have some money. And because of that, there aren't enough taxes. And then the people who had, as that began to shift, that means people who had some money began to leave. And the people who had no money began to grow. Because there is no more rungs on the ladder. There isn't another group that comes in. All it does is continue to fill with people who have no money.
So, in addition to what you just described, I know when you were talking about where you grew up, that influx of crack. Do you think that anything like that happened in East Cleveland?
I'm sure it did. I mean, later in the 80s and the 90s, I'm not quite sure because I didn't come through here. All I knew is there was only 2 police officers in the city, and you know, this was the Wild West. It was a building down here near Shaw that they called the Carter, which is the name of a building, a crack building complex in New Jack City. And that in the movie it was called the Carter. It was the headquarters of the drug kingpin Nino Brown.
New Jack City.
New Jack City is a movie in the 80s about a drug dealer named Nino Brown and the crack epidemic. And they called a building down here in East Cleveland the Carter. I had an uncle who lived here, and I went to his house a few times during that era, but I never really came through East Cleveland. And I don't want you to get the impression that simply because people had no money, that that in itself is a problem. Poor people in anywhere, any color, there are ill effects that come along with that. I mean, almost every poor community is the same. I mean, people have to struggle to survive, and people will do whatever it takes to survive, and you see that every day on the streets. But if you have no money, you can't maintain, which led to the deterioration.
So then the changes you described, what do you think brought them about? What caused them?
People who, because of their finances, allowed them to live a certain lifestyle, don't want to be around those who don't fit in that lifestyle. So what they do is they leave an area where they believe the people that live around them doesn't fit in that lifestyle. So they leave. And that's what happens.
And so please give your title, your current employer.
I'm the executive assistant to the mayor.
And what does that mean? What do you do? The mayor, identify the mayor?
Mayor Gary Norton, City of East Cleveland.
And when did you take that position?
The day that he came, a month before he had actually taken office, he had asked me if I wanted a job. As a matter of fact, I was his campaign manager. And a week before the election, he said, "Hey, so what do you want to do?" I said, "I don't want a job. I just want you to win." I was starting a business at the time, and it was consulting in the child care industry. As a matter of fact, 2 days before the primary, I had gotten my first contract. But I was not interested in having a job. And we were sitting in McDonald's a week before residents would vote. And he says, what do you want to do? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, what do you want to do for the city? I mean, what do you do? I mean, in the administration? I said, he said, what do you want? And I said, I want you to win. That's all I want. I'm not in this for anything else. So we won. I went on continuing to do what I do.
This is 2008.
This is 2009.
Well, when he took office, but he won the.
He wasn't in office yet. It was 2009. It was between the time that he won and January 1st, 2010. He won the primary September 29th, 2009. The primary determines the mayor because there's no Republican opponent. So.
For some reason, I was thinking he was elected in, well, I know, that was President Obama.
Right.
Okay, so he was elected a year later, in 2009.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, so I wasn't really interested in the job, and, you know, we hadn't talked in a while. And, you know, then we talked. He said, hey, you know, I want you to work in my administration. I'm like, no, I'm not really interested. And he said, yeah, I really need you. I said, you know, okay. I said, but I will not do anything that I'm not qualified for. That's not me. I'm not going to take some position, any position for that matter, whether it's fixing a car to heading up a department. I'm not going to do anything I'm not qualified for. I mean, it's a waste of time, effort, and resources, and not as if he offered me anything that I wasn't qualified for, but that was just a qualifier for me. I'm not going to take anything I'm not qualified for. And then a couple more weeks went by. He said, hey, a couple days went by. He said, yeah, I got the perfect job for you. I said, am I qualified for it? He said, sure. I said, so what would be my responsibilities? He said, a little bit of a lot of things. I said, okay, I may be qualified for that, to do a little bit of a lot of things. He said, no, I want you to be my executive assistant. I said, okay, so what am I supposed to do? Because I wouldn't take that if I wasn't qualified for it, you know. And he said again, a little bit of a lot of things. I said, well, can I get a couple days to think about it? So, took a couple days and I thought about it. I said, okay. You know, I would like for him to be successful. I think he, you know, is a great individual, a very intelligent, astute individual. And at the time, I knew that he would do a good job. Even before he had actually taken office, I knew he would do a good job. So I said, okay, I'll take the job. So I took the job, and lo and behold, the position was what he wanted me to do, filled my skill set.
What, for instance?
Helping to promote the city to the outside world. One thing that he knew, and that we all know, is that the city will never, in its current state, generate enough revenue to do much. So we have to build external relationships with organizations, entities, and individuals that have the resources to invest, either financially or intellectually, in the city. And he wanted me to help him with that. And the relationships that we build to help manage those relationships so that we can get the most out of them. So that was my skill set. That was fine. I did that, you know. And then he wanted more out of me, help design particular programs. I didn't know if I could do that, but I did it. The paint program, the Reimagine program, NSP program.
NSP?
Neighborhood Stabilization Program, to help design programs for that. So those are are three of the most important things that I do.
Let's think back a little bit. As the campaign manager, was that also things that well, what did you do as that campaign manager?
Really mapped the campaign, where we go, what we do when we get there, what we need in order to do it, and to ensure that the people who are responsible for each component of it did it and knew what they were supposed to do. And that's what I did.
Have you ever been impacted by race or racism? And if so, how?
Ever been? I've been spat on. I lived in Cleveland Heights, and I was walking by Coventry and Mayfield, and there was some Italian kids from Little Italy that pulled up out the car and they spat on me, on my coat. So that's one thing that I remember specifically.
Where were you? You said
I was standing on the corner in Mayfield and Coventry.
Okay.
That is the one thing that I truly remember.
How do you know they were Italian?
Because they said they were.
And do you think race has impacted East Cleveland, and if so, how?
I don't necessarily believe race was the ultimate factor in what we have today as inclusion. But do I believe it impacted it? Of course. I mean, this was an all-white community that really didn't want blacks to move here, but then blacks did, and then the whites left because of it. Because of how fast blacks were moving in, and what the stereotypes were, and what people said blacks would do to their community. So they left. Now, that didn't necessarily negatively impact East Cleveland, because the blacks who moved in had the finances to move in. But it created, I guess it did, here's the negative impact then on it. When whites moved out, and at the pace that they moved out, it didn't necessarily, blacks didn't necessarily fill the entire gap, right? Which means you have places to live that goes unsold, and it's not like, you know, the housing of today and the crisis that happened where people walked away from their homes, because some people didn't. Some people rented their houses. And a population of renters in areas where there were all homeowners began to grow. So that changed East Cleveland, but simply because whites left, that didn't necessarily lead to where we are today.
And,
It impacted it, but it wasn't like the overriding factor. Mm-hmm.
And on that idea that whites left in response to black people moving in, this is really just a hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the same thing would have happened if the blacks moving in had the same kind of income as the people who already lived here? Because you mentioned that the blacks who moved in were more, I don't know, the word you used had some money, but I'm going to say, you know, working class,
right,
compared to upper class,
mm-hmm,
in terms of finances.
right,
People who already lived here.
Right.
Do you think if they were more equitable in terms of who had money?
whites would have left anyway.
Because there was so many black people coming all at once?
Yeah, because when white flight happened, the house that was worth $150,000 was now worth $75,000. So the blacks that had money could afford the 175,000.
You mean the 75,000?
No, the 150,000. But when it happened the way that it happened, the market changed, which allowed people who had some money to afford to buy a house. But it's really economics in this case, because blacks moved away from blacks who had some money or little money because they didn't want to be around them. So it appears on the surface to be color, but and the intent of each individual, white person did not believe that they need to leave because of whites, because of blacks. Some did, some left because of it. Others left because their value, the property value, went down. The value of the community changed because of it. And they left because they could afford to live in a place that had the standards that they were looking for, because the standards will change when people with less economic, financial capabilities move into a community. I mean, you rely more on public services when you have less money. That's just the reality, you know. So, but blacks do the same thing. Blacks did the same thing here. Blacks who were here in the 70s, 60s, and though they had kids and they raised their kids, and their kids went on to college, they didn't move back to East Cleveland. They made they made their lives in other places. So blacks did the same thing.
You mean the kids when they grew up? They didn't go back.
And those who were here and saw blacks who moving in who weren't on the same financial level as them left because of that too. Because poorer blacks moved in. I mean, the South Side of Chicago is the epitome of that story, if you know anything about the South Side of Chicago. Okay. Southern blacks moving in the South Side, and the Northern blacks, affluent elitists, they left. And then bam, South Side of Chicago crashed. City of East Cleveland. At least some parts of it.
Oh, speaking of all of this is a question I asked you the other day. I'm going to just restate it. More than once, somebody has talked to me about some of the development that's happening in the city right now, like the Circle East townhouse project, and they've expressed concern about gentrification, about, you know, wealthy white people moving in and taking over East Cleveland. What would be your response to those kind of concerns? Specifically, what I'm wondering is there a thought process in place where we can have more of a mixed community in terms of not only race but economically?
Have you been in the Circle East area?
I live in the Circle East area.
Okay, you live in the Circle East area. You know the challenges of the so-called Circle East area.
Yes. Challenges in terms of the infrastructure.
Infrastructure, crime, socioeconomic statuses. What rich white person you know is moving into that area? Abandonment. Circle East is across the street from two abandoned properties. Well, 1, 2, 3 abandoned properties. 2 huge commercial abandoned properties. So to suggest that whites are trying to take over, and we've just had this whole discussion about people wanting to live where they feel that their neighbors will be compatible with them financially to create a certain lifestyle. Circle East does not represent that lifestyle. Now, the people who are moving into Circle East are true pioneers, but these are people who just simply got jobs. It's not like they are industry owners. These are people who just simply have jobs. And in Circle East, it's multicultural. You have whites, you have blacks, you have Indians. I think you have a few Arabs. I think you have a couple Asians. You know, it's multicultural. To suggest that simply building Circle East leads to gentrification, I think is an irresponsible statement. I don't believe for anyone to think that. I think it's irresponsible because to believe that that would occur simply because Circle East was built, and if you look at the population of Circle East, it doesn't represent that.
So the people that I've heard say this, they're not just talking about Circle
Right.
East. And I want to clarify, I live in front of Idlewood Avenue. But these people aren't talking about just Circle East, but about the development overall, because people have seen what happened as the Cleveland Clinic kind of, spread itself into neighborhoods and created pockets, displaced homeowners, and created pockets where, even the street you grew up on, no longer, those people.
We all rented.
The original habitat, if you will, didn't benefit from the redevelopment. And that's the concern that I've heard expressed more than once. So.
But you have to realize the difference with an entity called Cleveland Clinic in the city of East Cleveland. If we look at self-interest of Cleveland Clinic is to have the people who work for them live closer to their institution. In their self-interest, they're going to do what it takes to get the people who work for them to live next to them, to the actual physical structure. Our self-interest as a city is to ensure that we rebuild a tax base in a way that brings residents, businesses, and industry. It's our responsibility, any responsibility of any. But this particular mayor has demonstrated that there is no desire to displace people. Perfect example. Your neighborhood, you live in front of Idlewood. Idlewood has a new street put in.
It stopped before it got to my house.
Oh, okay. But it's Idlewood. There's a new street put in. We have a paint program that's operating on that street. We have a demolition program that's operating on that street. We have new construction on that street, and we got renovation on that street. The renovations that we're doing and the new constructions that are doing is being marketed, obviously throughout the area, but specifically in East Cleveland. The mayor said in his own words, we want to give East Clevelanders the opportunity to get a piece of the American dream through home ownership. The houses that are being renovated and built has a salary cap, which allows people of lower means to afford them. Right now, a renovated house that has $210,000 of renovations in it is on the market for $100,000. And the soft second mortgages, the grants, go up to $30,000. So you can buy a $210,000 fully renovated house for $70,000. Where in America does that exist? And an East Cleveland resident who makes $40,000 a year can afford a $70,000 mortgage. That takes your payments probably less than your rent if you got 2 kids. That's a 3-bedroom apartment that's going to cost you $800 a month, $900 a month. And your mortgage is like 6 something. at that time, at that rate. And as the annual percentage rates for mortgages now, they're at 3.2%. And we're partnering with institutions that give down payment assistance. So to suggest that we're simply doing this in order to gentrify that area, we would not be putting those type of opportunities on the streets that have some of the best architecture, not only in East Cleveland, but in Ohio. We would not be creating opportunities for them. We would just take them and mothball them. And every time one go into foreclosure, we will get it and mothball them. And as that area develop, market them to people who are not East Cleveland residents, market them to people who solely market them to people who are white. But that's not what's going on. The class that we had for housing counseling, there were 3 white people out of 15 people that were there. So he's not saying that that's not the thing. He is demonstrating that gentrification, simply turning the community over to white people, he's demonstrating that that is not a fact.
So I just, like I said, I don't,
I'm just answering the question. I don't believe it to be your personal feeling. I'm just answering the question. And I apologize for being so emotional about it. And I am, because I work on these programs.
And that's really great that you are. I just, beyond just, this interview session, I think there needs to be a better getting this word out. Because I'm continually hearing it, which makes me think there's even more people who feel this way who don't say it, who I just don't talk to. And in addition to that, who just don't really know what the mayor is doing. Because they're just complaining about the same old stuff that's happened for 20 years, not realizing that something different is happening.
We're planning to deal with that as well.
Okay. Back on track. Can you remember a time when the community fought for something?
Yeah. I mean, one of the perfect examples is here in Road Hospital, and it's unfortunate that we have elected officials who are doing what they're doing in terms of blaming the mayor for allowing, quote unquote, allowing here in Road Hospital to leave, when the community fought to ensure that Cleveland Clinic invest in this community. I mean, you have a situation where since 2000, community hospitals in poor neighborhoods have been shutting down all across the country. 2,000 community hospitals were shut down. 1,000 were shut down in the year 2000 alone, all across the country.
Are they being taken over, or is it because of the spread of big conglomerate hospitals? Or?
It's how healthcare is being, and this is, I can't say that this is not my information, but this is what I've read and what I've seen. How healthcare is being delivered, that is changing. The cost of healthcare is forcing certain types of changes. And the desire not to subsidize hospitals in poor communities with folks who don't have health insurance has an effect on it.
So you said there are changes taking place. What are subsidized, not subsidizing is one change. What are some of the other changes?
How to centralize hospitals and put clinics in communities and just have a centralized hospital somewhere, or few hospitals. Instead of having a hospital in every community, have geographics play a role and economics play a role in where hospitals are. And then you go to these small clinics and get referred to a hospital. There was a time where you go to the hospital to get referred to a hospital, a specialist or something like that. So that is changing, and it's all about economics, really. The cost of healthcare is rising. So I believe this is and the fact that they've been subsidizing hospitals in poor communities for decades, they decided to stop.
Who decided? Is that the federal government?
No, the healthcare industry and those who make decisions for it, and those healthcare hospital operators who make decisions for it. I mean, it's just the reality. So because of those changes, and a giant like Cleveland Clinic says that they want to shut down one of their operations, that can't be stopped by anyone if that's what they desire to do. That's like me telling you that, and you selling hamburgers out of your restaurant, and you want to leave and go to another community. That's like the mayor telling you that you can't leave. You can't shut down your business in East Cleveland and move it elsewhere. Let alone telling a multi-billion-dollar entity that they can't leave. You must stay because I say so. It's ludicrous. That's like telling, that's what happened to East Cleveland. Go on Hayden and look at all those closed storefronts. Was the mayor of that time can go to those businesses and say, you can't leave? You're not going anywhere? I forbid you, and then and force them to stay? You can't force a business to stay. We knew when we figured out, when they finally admitted that they were closing the hospital, we knew that we must do something. And Prevail of Noah knew that we must do something. And the something is to Prevail Heart Noah, Northeastern Ohio Alliance for Hope, knew that we must hold them corporately responsible for a decision that we can't stop them from making, which led to a settlement seen in this community that has never been seen in any other community, ever, in the history of hospital closures. No investment like Cleveland Clinic has made in this community has been done anywhere else.
And what was that investment?
$10 million in what is called pilots. It's a variation, payment in lieu of taxes. They agreed to pay the taxes they would have paid for over the next 5 years after the hospital was closed and the employees are gone. No community has ever received anything like that. The complete demolition of the hospital and to clean up the land has never been done. And to give that valuable land back to the city. That's about $20 million in cash and assets and construction and demolition costs that comes to the city of East Cleveland. No other community in the history of hospital closures have ever positioned itself, fought for, and won those types of things. And the residents were involved all over the place.
So is it, has that action actually influenced other communities in Ohio or elsewhere?
It will. It will. It set a precedent, a national precedent. Hopefully communities will, and the residents of those communities where those hospitals are important to them, will act, you know.
And has anybody expressed interest in the land?
All the time. All the time. You know, I don't want to go into it right now, but yeah.
I vote for a swimming pool. Okay. Put it on record. All right.
Oh, 6 acres?
A new rec center.
No doubt.
With a track.
Yeah, okay.
How have the institutions that surround the city impacted East Cleveland?
Circle East is a prime example. Cuyahoga County, the county land bank, City of East Cleveland, and University Circle Inc., the CDC that developed University Circle. Part,
CDC?
it's a CDC, Community Development Corporation. UCI, University Circle Inc. is a community development corporation. And now they call themselves Community Service Corporation. But they are responsible for developing their neighborhood, which is University Circle. UCI now owns something other than a parking lot in the city of East Cleveland. Something that they must, an investment that they made that they have to protect. And I use that as an example because it's the most important example, because the entities that I've outlined came together, brought resources together to build something that did not exist.
And can you describe Circle East? What exactly is it?
Circle East is a 21-unit, 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath, 2-car garage townhouse community. And a private developer, which is the Finch Group, went into a joint venture with University Circle Inc. Now, University Circle Inc. has a housing development that they co-own in the city of East Cleveland. First time ever. It was an empty parking lot that had environmental issues. The building that was there before it became a parking lot was buried under the parking lot. So you could never develop on it unless you clean up the site. It was a parking lot. It really wasn't being used. So now it is what sits on it now is a 21-unit townhouse community. The importance of that is the only way to protect that. You can't build a moat around it. You can't put a fire-breathing dragon around it. You can't put gun turrets in each corner of it. The only way to protect it is to invest around it. That's the only way. Now, they're forced, if you want to use a word like forced, to continue to participate in the development of that area because it protects their investment.
You know what, I need to backtrack. Before you said when you first got to East Cleveland, returned to East Cleveland to work for Mayor Norton,
I didn't work for him.
Volunteer.
Right.
There were 2 police officers?
No. Before that, I was like in the 80s. That was the thing. That's what you heard, man. They only got 2 police officers on duty up there.
Was that true or the myth?
I don't know. Never really checked in it. It was true for me. That's why I didn't drive through the town. Right, okay.
Okay. Okay. What is your personal vision for the city of East Cleveland?
My personal vision?
For in addition, what are some of the issues that need to be addressed to make East Cleveland better?
The problem, the single most important problem that needs to be addressed is the leadership, the elected officials that govern the city. The problem with East Cleveland in itself is horrible leadership. The corruption, the ignorance meaning not knowing how to operate a government.
And you're specifically speaking of the council.
I'm speaking of the governments that led to the government that we have today.
Okay.
The government that made running for office by capable, competent people something that they would never consider doing. It's the government that led to in my mind, to the downfall. Because although poorer people were moving in, it could have been mitigated if we had effective government. If we had effective government, which could have helped people who were poorer, put them in opportunities to have them less poor. And people who wanted to stay but saw the decline happen chose to leave. And they did nothing about it, in my estimation, or they were involved in some type of corruption to fleece the city. So effective leadership is, or the lack thereof, led to the official downfall of the city.
So, do you think that a person has to have a, certain income in order to be an effective leader? Or
I think you have to have a certain level of experience, and you have to actually care about helping, not about your own personal interests, but helping. In this day and age, but even then, you had educated people who came from significant means, and some of them were the most corrupt. Judges went to jail, commissioners went to jail, mayors went to jail. Just the fleecing of this city,
So then, how do you envision these? What is your vision for the city going forward?
For residents to recognize that, recognize what it takes to bring the community back, which is developing effective partnerships with organizations, entities, and individuals who actually want to invest in this community and be a part of those relationships, so that they can see that it's not just the physical development that's important, which they know, but they would love to have the input of the people who actually live here. Now, if those who are helping us develop and who has the means to help us is asking for residents' input, then gentrification is a moot point. If all they cared about was the redevelopment, they wouldn't care what you thought. They will come in, buy it, tear it down, build it, put a fence around it, and put a sign up saying you're not welcome. But these same institutions are saying, hey, we'd love to have the community involved. So my vision is the residents coming together with those who want to invest in their community and understand and learn for themselves that those entities and organizations and entities are not the enemy.
What do you think is causing those organizations, institutions to be interested after all? I mean, I've been here 20 years.
A lot of people who are now heads of industry, heads of institutions, grew up in the city of East Cleveland. This town has produced, it's amazing the type of people and the things that they're doing out in the world and where they come from. They come from East Cleveland, or have family members that come from East Cleveland. And if not, they have a desire to help a community that they believe can come back.
That's part of it. But also, they've been out there, some of them are older, so they've already been out there for many years doing what they do. But they haven't been coming back to East Cleveland. So I'm asking, why are they doing it now?
Why, or who doing it?
Just various outside
Okay.
entities and people.
It's
who want
simple.
help.
It's simple. It's because who the chief executive officer of the city is. This is the first mayor that brings the level of credibility of those who can invest in this community. And in some cases, the mayor went to school with people who were in positions to invest. And his professional career, he grew up with these people. And they have a true respect for who he is. I mean, they could have come 5 years ago. They could have come 10 years ago. They had no confidence in the person who sat in that black seat right there. Now they do.
And by the way, we are in the office of Gary Norton, and you just referred to his seat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what are you prepared to do, beyond what you've already done, to participate in making East Cleveland better?
I don't know what else I can give. I give my time. I work with any and everyone who truly have this community's interest at heart. I don't know what else to do. I meet and develop relationships with developers and institution heads, and I promote this community. But I guess there is one thing I would like to do. I would like help to bridge the gap between residents and these institutions and those who run them. Help make that relationship happen the way that it should.
Jarod, you have any questions?
No, I do not have any questions.
Well, thank you, Mike Smedley. It's been a pleasure. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
I want y'all to erase this tape. No, just kidding. No, I don't have anything else to say.
All right,
You
thanks
got?
a lot.
Okay.